Brett, I've been realizing in the past, I don't know, 2, 3 years, how much I never talked about the trauma that I was actually going through at that time in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And all those people I worked with had no idea that, all those days during my internship, I would go home and be abused by my fiance. I was in a domestic violence situation with he was my college boyfriend who became my fiance. He moved home with me to Columbus from Kent. He, I think, obviously had really bad, I think, undiagnosed mental illness. And he was a violent person. He probably still is. I'm glad that I don't have to know whether he still is because I don't know him anymore. I did leave the relationship, but this guy, I thought that it was my fault. Like I never told anybody what was going on, that he was, taking me into the closet in our house and berating me or spitting on me for not ironing his clothes the right way. Or I remember he freaked out once because I don't know if you're into design, so you probably know about curtains that are like a crepey, gauzy material, and they're not like perfectly pressed. The look is to be crepey and gauzy. And I just remember I hung some beautiful curtains, and he like freaked out that they weren't like crepey and gauzy. He thought it looked bad, and he just oh my God. One night we were drinking with his, just having beers and playing cards with his cousin and his wife. And my boyfriend had had a little too much. And I was like, hey, do you really want to have another beer? And he freaked out and broke every light bulb in our house.
Wow.
He would chase people in the car all the time. He would traumatize me driving like 90 miles an hour on the freeway, chasing other drivers and shaking his fist at them and like pounding the roof of the car, screaming at the top of his lungs. It was terrible.
Yeah.
And I always blamed myself. I was like, why don't I just leave this guy? It's so weird. I didn't even really love him, honestly. Like, it wasn't that I thought I was so in love and I couldn't leave him. It was just that I was stuck. I was financially dependent on him. I was a young woman, and my mom had died. My mom had died right before I graduated from college. And that was something else that played heavily into this time of my life, was her death. And I think it affected decisions that I made. But, I always thought, why don't I just leave this guy? Like I should just leave him. And I'm doing the wrong thing. And so I was embarrassed and I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell anyone I worked with. I had like 1 or 2 friends who knew what was going on. And I remember once one of them gave me a card for Choices, Victims of Domestic Violence. It's a nonprofit in Columbus. And he was like, hey, if you ever need to seek help. And I was just like, what are you talking about? That's not my life.
Yeah, Katy, let me jump in there. And thank you for sharing that and just coming forward, right away with that. I'm just imagining, you in this time and getting this sense that it must have been so overwhelming and kind of all encompassing that like you felt some sort of sense of being stuck or trapped or just not even sure how to handle this or to, get out of it or navigate it. Can you maybe just talk a little bit more of like what, and I think this is really important because, there could be other people that are currently in this situation, certainly other people that have experienced this and kind of having this shared experience and kind of bringing awareness to it and attention to it and maybe letting other people know they're not alone in this thing. Sadly it happens more than any of us would like. Talk a little bit about kind of what happened for you. How are you feeling? how did you manage to navigate it and ultimately get out of it?
So it went on for 6 years, which is just so way too long. And it was like one thing, there was always some reason not to leave, like early in our relationship, I didn't want to leave because I thought that I couldn't afford my own apartment in college. That was complete bullshit. Of course, I could
Mm,
afford the apartment. But that was my reason. Later in life, I felt stuck. I couldn't leave because I was engaged to this guy now, and I, he had a promising career as an architect, interesting person, had a lot of flaws, obviously, but so the engagement prolonged it. My mother's death and that feeling of general just insecurity in the universe, feeling like I was in a chaotic and destructive universe, that this bad relationship sadly brought a sense of security. If you, to put the other things in context. And then, after my mom died, my boyfriend bullied me into using the money that I got from her death, which was only $5,000, to buy a house.
mhm,
And I mean, he like took me on, this was in 2004 or something, or three. Like we would go look at places and he would berate me again in the closets of these places while realtors were there, like
mhm, mhm,
telling me, because I didn't really like any of the places. And he'd be like, no, we
mhm,
have to pick one. So finally
mhm,
we did buy a house. So it was like, there you go. We bought a house together. So I'm further stuck. And I
mhm,
remember just spending hours and days and weeks and months just like in this horrible, suspended in inertia, just like emotional inertia, intellectual inertia. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't creating anything. I wasn't myself at all. I was just like in this terrible purgatory,
mhm,
waiting,
mhm,
knowing that one day I would leave, knowing that it would end somehow. And the way it finally did end was that I got pregnant
mhm,
and I had an abortion.
mhm,
I called my dad and I told him what was happening. I didn't tell him about the abortion. And I can say that now because he's dead. But
mhm, mhm,
um, I told him what was happening and I called my best friend from high school and we rented an apartment on the street that I now live on again today. And I got an abortion and I left that guy. My dad
mhm,
came and picked me up with the truck.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
And the last time I saw him, I was driving away while he was kicking my car.
mhm, mhm. Wow. Katy, thank you, first of all, again, for sharing that story. And, gosh, it makes me sad that, anyone would have to experience that, all of it. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot for, a young woman, any human, nobody should have to go through that. And, the courage and strength that you've had to get out of it and move on with your life is really admirable.